They said I failed. Said I couldn't handle the grind, the pressure, the grit of ROC. My sister Madison, the family's golden soldier, used to joke at the dinner table, Ashley's a civilian at heart, always will be. It didn't sting because of the words, it stung because no one disagreed. They believed it. When I disappeared from their lives, no one asked why. No one imagined I might be serving, just not in the way they understood. I enlisted quietly under a classified intelligence contract. My name was scrubbed from official training records. No medals, no recognition, just missions. In their eyes, I was the dropout. But to my unit, I was essential. That morning changed everything. I stood in the training field at Edwards Base Desert Dust, clinging to my boots. I wore a simple black jacket, no rank on display, just another civilian observer, at least on paper. Far across the field, Madison was drilling a new batch of recruits. She walked right past me, didn't even blink. Just like always. Then came Sergeant Bruckner, the kind of drill sergeant that could make captains sweat. He stalked down the line, eyes scanning the bleachers, until they landed on me. He froze, then turned, marching directly toward me. I didn't flinch, didn't move. Just stood there as he stopped less than 2 feet away, snapped to attention, and saluted. "General Walker, ma'am. I wasn't informed you'd be present." The air stopped moving. Recruits froze mid-breath. Officers shifted uncomfortably. And Madison, my sister, who once mocked me, dropped her training rifle. It hit the ground with a crack that cut through the silence like a thunderclap. I nodded slightly, speaking just loud enough for him to hear. "I'm here off duty. Keep this quiet, Sergeant." He nodded sharply. No questions, no explanations. But in that instant, everything they thought they knew began to unravel. I never thought I'd return to Spokane. Not because it hurt, but because it was hollow. A small town where whispers travel faster than facts, where failure isn't written on paper, but etched into the way people glance at you without really seeing. The message from my mother came on a Monday afternoon. Short, sterile, Saturday, party for Madison. Be on time. Don't dress weird. No, we miss you. No, how have you been? Just an order. Like I was still the 17-year-old being told to wash up for dinner. I pulled into the old neighborhood just after sunset. The porch light still flickered. The mailbox still leaned slightly to the left. Everything was the same except me. I stepped out of the car, took a long breath, and walked up to the door. The scent of cinnamon and roasted ham drifted out like a memory I didn't ask for. Inside the house had been transformed into something resembling a military celebration, red-white banners, printed programs, formal name cards. In the center of it all, a giant homemade sign, "Congratulations, Lieutenant Madison." No one looked up when I entered. I wore a simple gray button-up. No insignia, no medals, just neutral enough to disappear. But in this house, even invisible had a shape, and mine was always out of place. Dad was the first to acknowledge me. "What are you doing these days?" Before I could answer, he launched into a story about Madison's performance reviews, field strategy scores, and how proud her superiors were. I was just a pause in his script. My Aunt Kendra, already half a glass in, added with a smirk, "Didn't you used to play waitress as a kid? Guess you went pro, huh?" I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't show teeth but lands like a surgical strike. I've gotten better at performing, not enough to bruise, just enough to make the bone ache later. Then, like some unspoken tradition, I was asked to grab more forks and refill the water. No one offered help. No one asked if I minded. It was simply assumed I was the extra, the leftover, the one who had failed. I came back to the table with arms full of silverware and water, like I had 100 times before growing up in this house, part of the machinery invisible but necessary. No one said thank you. No one made room. I glanced around. Every seat had a name card, neat, pristine, printed in bold font. I checked twice. My name wasn't there. No extra place had been set. My mother looked up blinking like she'd only just realized I was standing. "Oh, right. You can sit by the grill. There's a folding chair outside." I didn't protest, just nodded and stepped onto the porch. The air was sharp cold enough to cut. I sat in the metal folding chair, the chill seeping through my pants and straight into my spine. Inside, I could hear them laughing, Madison loud and effortless. She was telling a story, maybe about tactics, maybe about me. I didn't care. I looked through the window at the photos on the dining room wall. Madison in uniform, Madison beside Dad at her oath ceremony, Madison getting a medal, Madison and Mom Madison and Aunt Cheryl, Madison and everyone, but never me, not once. I didn't need proof. I'd lived that absence my entire life. But seeing it staring at a wall curated with memories I'd never been invited into felt like gazing into a world meticulously constructed to forget I ever existed. And then I saw her, Madison. Through the glass, her eyes flicked toward me. Just for a second. Not cruel, not kind, just searching. Like she didn't know what she was looking for. She didn't smile, didn't frown, just looked. And in that moment, I realized my silence wasn't disappearance. It was a statement they'd never heard. I'm still here. And I was never your joke. I sat on the porch, Spokane's cold wrapping around me like a silent dare, as if the air itself was trying to freeze me in place, keep me locked in the role they'd assigned the outsider. Laughter floated through the window, dulled by glass and distance. I couldn't make out the words anymore. It was background noise now, a broken radio playing someone else's frequency. I closed my eyes for a second, resisting the urge to rewind through memory, but then I felt it. The faint buzz against my hip, a slim encrypted receiver tucked into the lining of my coat. No one inside would recognize it. They couldn't imagine I even owned something like it. I tapped the screen. A soft light blinked on. A message appeared crisp and direct. "Report to Edwards Base. Assignment observation. Oversight Security Council. High priority. No hesitation." My lips curled into the first real smile of the evening. Not polite. Not bitter. Just real. The kind of smile that only comes when you're reminded someone out there remembers who you are and needs you. I closed the device and slipped it back into its hidden pocket. Through the window, Madison was still laughing, her face bathed in warm light, soaking in applause. I didn't envy her. I didn't hate her. I just looked at the wall behind her, the one lined with curated memories, and thought one day they'll have to rearrange every frame on that wall, not because I need to be in them, but because they need to realize I was always there even when they chose not to look. Edwards Base at sunrise always had a raw kind of beauty sky, stretched wide, soft gold light, brushing against red sand boots, slamming rhythm into the earth like a military hymn. I wasn't there to salute. I wasn't there to command. I was there to watch quietly. I wore a pressed black jacket, tactical pants, and a standard visitor badge. No rank, no unit name, just a serial code embedded in the chip, encrypted, unreadable to most. On paper, I was a civilian observer, but those who knew what to look for knew enough to keep quiet. I chose a seat in the back row of the guest bleachers, hidden between two civilian contractors and an admin clerk who checked her watch like it owed her something. Out on the field, Madison stood at the front of her unit, back straight, commands crisp, posture perfect. I'll give her this, she knew how to own a stage. But she had no idea I was in the audience. Then Sergeant Bruckner emerged, gravel and gunpowder in his voice, steel in his posture. The kind of man who once chewed out a lieutenant colonel for folding his sleeves wrong. He walked the line, scanning the crowd, and then he saw me. He stopped mid-step. The entire field held its breath. Without a word, he turned and marched directly toward me. I stood up, calm, still. He halted 2 feet from me, snapped to attention, and saluted with a voice like thunder. "General Walker, ma'am." Silence hit like a blast wave. A training rifle slipped from Madison's hands, clattering onto the ground with a sound sharp enough to slice the moment in 2. A recruit near her whispered, "Wait!" "She's a general." I kept my tone level. "I'm here off duty, Sergeant. Keep this quiet." Bruckner gave a sharp nod. No questions, no explanation, and just like that he turned on his heel and walked away. But I knew what that moment meant. After today, no one in Madison's unit would look at her the same way again. That night, while whispers still floated through the barracks about the woman Bruckner saluted, I slipped out of Edwards base through a side gate. No attention, no declarations. I wasn't there to make waves, only to hold the tide. My guest suite was nondescript, no nameplate, no housekeeping, just 4 walls, and silence thick enough to settle in your lungs. My old deployment pack sat on the desk, compact, worn, efficient. On top was something I hadn't seen in over a year. I'd given it to Madison once, a nondescript duffel handed off like it held nothing more than gym clothes. She didn't ask. I didn't explain. That was how we kept peace through distance disguised as neutrality. She never opened it, until now. At 2:47 a.m., my encrypted alert system flared awake. Not a routine ping, a full-blown security breach. Level 4. The screen blinked crimson, unauthorized access detected. Origin internal node. Profile tag, Huxley Alpha. My blood ran cold. Huxley Alpha was a ghost tag retired when I transitioned from field ops to strategic intelligence. Someone had just reactivated my footprint. Not from the outside, from inside the base. I traced it immediately. The digital trail led to a temporary use device, an old simulation unit issued during training 2 weeks ago. The same model I'd assigned to Madison. She'd kept it. And now she'd unknowingly unlocked the gate to a program designed to stay buried. I should have reported her, but I didn't. Instead, I initiated a secure back channel to the only man in that base who had both clearance and integrity, Bruckner. At the bottom of the message, I wrote one line. "This wasn't random. Someone wants me exposed." I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When you've lived in the shadows long enough, you learn to tell the difference between random mistakes and engineered traps. And this breach, it reeked of someone who had once hunted me and failed. I arrived at the Strategic Coordination Center before dawn. The lights were harsh, the air sterile with ozone and tension. Major Penn was already there, arms folded, her voice taut, with quiet suspicion. "We logged unauthorized access from your retired ID. It triggered a subroutine in the Alderson React program." "Explain." I didn't flinch. I didn't do it. But I'll find who did. We locked eyes in that suspended silence where rank and responsibility square off without drawing weapons. Then she gave a tight nod and handed me temporary admin access. I had 36 hours before the report hit Joint Command. I dove into the trace line by encrypted layer, and then I found it an anomaly in the metadata. Obscured, outdated. But I knew the pattern. Croft, Nathan Croft. He'd been my operations officer back in Eastern Europe 2018. The mission was Canderline. He issued an order to purge a civilian village over a single unconfirmed intel source. No warrant, no recon, just fire and steel. I refused. 3 days later, he was reassigned quietly, efficiently. His career to generalship burned. I lit the match. And now, he'd left a time bomb in the ashes. The code wasn't just a ghost file, it was a dormant worm embedded 5 years ago deep in legacy archives, waiting for one spark. Madison was the matchstick, but the explosives had been buried long before she ever touched it. I leaned back in my chair, eyes tracking the data. Croft wasn't gone, he was waiting, and now he'd made his move, luring me into his game piece by piece. I knew the protocol. When an unauthorized access hits a declassified intelligence program like Alderson React, There's only one response: report it immediately. Flag the breach. Isolate the user. Secure the system. And if the person responsible is your sister, you still do it, because the rules don't care about blood. But I didn't. I didn't file a report. Didn't flag Madison. Instead, I called her in. She entered the room with shoulders locked like she'd just finished a stress test. Her eyes darted between me and Bruckner, who stood silent, arms folded like a loaded warning. I motioned to the chair across from me. Sit down. She sat stiff, unsure, not yet realizing what she'd stepped into. You accessed a device linked to a retired clearance, I said. Whether you meant to or not, that breach crossed a federal line. Her throat bobbed. You're really a general. I didn't answer. I just said, from this point forward, if you're not working with me, you're a liability, and that makes this a criminal investigation. She froze. For a moment, all the bravado was gone. Then in a voice I barely recognized, you never told me. You never told anyone. I met her gaze, and for the first time, I didn't see the smug cadet who once mocked me. I saw someone genuinely searching for answers, not out of curiosity, but regret. Some places only exist in the dark, I said softly. And sometimes survival means staying silent so no one else has to carry the weight. She nodded slow. No excuses. No blame. I didn't press charges. Instead, I told her, you're going to help me trace this. Every log, every corrupted packet, every breadcrumb Croft left behind. Bruckner didn't speak, but his expression said it all. If she screws this up, both of you are done. I nodded. I know. And so we began not with trust, but necessity. Not because I needed her beside me, but because she needed to understand the kind of world she'd just stumbled into. One where some doors once opened can never be closed again. We hunted like soldiers in a digital war, not with rifles, but with logs, packets, and firewall echoes. In the cold pulse of the technical hub at Edwards, the hum of machines replaced the sound of gunfire. Me, Madison, and Bruckner side by side, chasing a ghost buried in code. No complaints, no blame, just 3 people trying to beat the clock. And then I found it. A worm triggered 5 years ago, embedded in a low-traffic server sector, too small to purge, too old to notice. But unmistakably, his Croft signature was etched into the code like a threat waiting to bloom. That kind of code doesn't evolve. It's planted. Intentionally, meticulously. And whoever planted it knew exactly what would happen once it woke up. When the pattern flashed across the screen, Madison paled. I touched it, she whispered. But he planted it long ago. I nodded. You were just the spark. He built the minefield years back. As we left the lab, Bruckner broke the silence not with doubt, but with a memory. There was a night, he said, Dnista River. 7 recruits trapped between crossfire. Command ordered retreat. He turned to Madison. Your sister didn't retreat. No backup. Just her and 2 medics. She brought every one of them home. Madison looked at me, then not with judgment, not with rivalry, with respect. The kind I never asked for, but this time I didn't reject it either. Back in the command center, I pulled up the final line in the trace. Source node server C17, last admin N, Croft status reassigned, file scrubbed. He was still out there. No medals, no uniform, just a shadow and a plan that never ended. We left the lab in silence. Outside, the sun had risen high, but the corridors between the command buildings remained cold, like time itself had stalled. In this place, time didn't move by clocks. It moved by code logs, encrypted flags, and decisions made behind locked doors. Madison walked beside me. No questions, no excuses. Something in her gait had shifted, no longer defiant, no longer uncertain. She was listening now. Learning. I pulled up a restricted file, Canderline 2018, never declassified. Croft, I began, wasn't just reckless. He was calculated and lethal. I told her everything: the border village, the unconfirmed intel, the snap purge order. Croft hadn't waited for confirmation. He ordered an entire zone wiped clean. I resisted. Submitted the truth. 3 days later, I was reassigned. Croft vanished. But before he disappeared, he planted a seed, a line of malicious code buried deep invisible until Madison tripped it years later. Her voice cracked. I woke the monster. I placed a hand on her shoulder. No, he kept it alive. We dove deeper, line by line, bite by bite, until Bruckner uncovered the last string of dread. Croft, active again, under an alias, operating less than 5 miles outside Fort Edwards. The pattern was clear now. He hadn't returned just to stir the dust. He came to finish me. Madison squared her shoulders like every drill she ever endured finally had a purpose. Then what are we waiting for? Bruckner turned to me, voice low but pointed. You want your name cleared? Or do you want justice? I didn't answer with words. I pulled the oldest encryption drive I owned from inside my coat analog offline untouchable and nodded. Time to drag the ghost into the light. The tribunal hall inside Western Command wasn't built for theatrics. No gavels, no juries. Just sharp eyes behind cold rank, a colonel and intel liaison, and 2 senior cyber warfare officers. They didn't care about feelings. They cared about facts. Croft sat across from me, dressed in civilian clothes, but still reeking of a uniform abused. He opened with a printed after-action report from Operation Canderline, his voice slick and rehearsed. Major Walker failed to report non-combatant casualties during the engagement, he said, like twisting a knife through the last threads of my integrity. The colonel turned to me. Major Walker, your response. I didn't plead. I didn't fume. I simply handed over a laminated scan, the original clearance order, his signature at the bottom, dated, time-stamped, final. He wrote the order, not me. He cut the comms line. He knew what was coming. Silence fell like snowfall. Then Bruckner stepped forward with a digital recording. My voice 5 years younger, but sharp as steel. Hold fire. There are heat signatures that resemble civilians. Wait for recon confirmation before continuing. No one spoke. But one of the cyber officers narrowed his eyes like he'd just seen something real. Then Madison stepped forward. In her hands, an access log. It showed Croft operating under a civilian alias had breached restricted systems 2 years ago, planting the very Trojan that triggered last week's attack. Finally, the colonel turned back to me. Do you want your name cleared publicly? I shook my head. If I step into the light, let it be for truth. Not for forgiveness. They nodded. All charges dropped. Clearance restored. Rank reaffirmed. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The silence in that room was loud enough. I stepped onto the stage at the Strategic Defense Cyber Summit at Fort Walker without ribbons, without a gilded backdrop, just one quiet line projected behind me. Courage in the shadows, fighting in silence, memory without names. The room was silent, not out of indifference, but because they were listening. I didn't start with rank or medals. I just said I never failed. I just chose to live where no one claps for doing the right thing. I spoke about Canderline. Not the names, not the village, just the moment, the decision to pause, to wait for verification, and the price I paid so that 17 names wouldn't end up carved in stone. I didn't dramatize. I didn't ask for pity. I just told the truth. In the front row, Madison sat upright in cadet blues, a binder in her lap, her proposal to reform cyber training built around the very breach she once caused. When I finished, she stood up. I used to think the tallest deserved the loudest praise, she said. I was wrong. It's those who kneel to shield others that deserve to be remembered. After the ceremony, Major Penn handed me a manila envelope, an official offer to declassify Operation Canderline. My name, my image, national recognition. I asked one question: if I agree, will my teammates be exposed? She hesitated, then nodded. There's risk. Encryption only goes so far. I gave the envelope back. I won't burn others just to light my name. On the way to the airfield, Madison handed me a small box wrapped in uniform cloth. Inside, my old Phoenix Command insignia restored polished. "I don't want to wear it," she said. "I want to live up to it." She saluted me for the first time. I didn't return a command. I embraced her. No words, no medals. On the plane, I pulled out an old photo my unit in the snow faces blurred with a handwritten line on the back. "Honor doesn't come from being seen. It comes from keeping your promise even when no one remembers you made it."